Challenge accepted. I will keep not so technical and leave space, hopefully, for a Q&A on technical details, because otherwise we get lost into technicalities. And I will present you an historical overview also of some research done, financed, sponsored by the European Commission in the past 10 years that goes in the direction of decentralization, decentralized architectures. So by now you got to know our organization, what it does, why it does it. And I think the contact point with PACESETTERS is not only that we are developing a credential system for reputation and mapping networks that is free, open source, and compliant with ADAS 2.0, but also that we have this drive towards usage of alternative, efficient, optimized, and open technologies that allow us also to put hands in dough and recycle components. So, without much to say about our introduction, I would like to bring your attention once again on the licensing scheme that we use, because I think this incorporates a successful story that is now, so 1984 was drafted, this license, so it is now 40 years. And it's a successful story on how to decentralize development worldwide. This is a generative approach, I would say. It's a license. It's a licensing scheme for software. And by granting these 4 freedoms, it rippled. It just like butterflied, if you allow me to verb this, into an effect that changed the way software was made, and also hardware was distributed with firmware on it. So this is just to open our mind to the topic. And what can be successful can sometimes be a very minimal intervention into a specific field that enables, or I rather say empowers people to do things in a more open and decentralized way. I believe that the GNU General Public License is a gem of decentralization. Compared to, you have to imagine the landscape of software at that time, where Microsoft distributed Office, Lotus distributed Lotus Notes, Domino, like centralized software dominated both corporate and consumer level of software. So I went to Wikipedia to find out, without any surprise, that it's obviously very approximated and even not exact about the definition of centralization. But once again, if you go on Wikipedia, you will find out that the utter simplification of decentralization is this diagram. So the left should be centralized and the right should be decentralized. This is ridiculous, to say the least. It's not reflecting what the concept of decentralization is, and obviously is amateurish as Wikipedia can ever be. We did a lot of research in decentralization. Our first project was called Decentralized Citizen Engagement Technologies, and we worked with academics from the Barcelona University, the UOC. In particular, David Laniado and Antonio Calleja Lopez wrote one of the deliverables, which became a book of decentralized citizen engagement technologies, under the supervision of Professor Manuel Castells, whom you may have heard before. They defined, by researching the conformation of the social landscape behind the protest of the 15 de Mayo. So these were the protests on the square that took place in Catalonia, started the 5th of May. They analyzed extensively, I can give you the link to this book, extensively the dynamics of communication, political communication, also in topic setting, priority settings, agenda setting, I should say, for the politics being discussed in Catalonia and in Spain at that time. And they found out that while typical classical parties had leaders establishing, deciding, I should say, the topics to be discussed, the new generation parties. In that time, we studied Podemos. We also studied Pirate Party in Iceland and Germany. We studied Five Star Movement in Italy and other parties that claimed to be applying participatory democracy. Well, more than everyone else, the Podemos movement truly set the agenda from different points of view. And here you see a diagram that they published into their deliverable and book that I think, I mean, this could be debated, but it goes farther than a cut and paste from Wikipedia. It does really describes what decentralization can be. And as you can see, it is not context free, I would say. It has to be applied to context to understand what decentralization is, and it's rather complex. Now, I will not go into the science of complex networking, but I just want to give you this point of view, like from this, which most people will cut and paste from Wikipedia, to this, which is truly a debate about centralization. And as you see, what Wikipedia advertises as decentralized is really hierarchy. So it's the creation of cascade nodes from central nodes, whereas the lattice with a mathematical definition, composition, the third starting from the left, is a peer-to-peer system, technically. So a system in which everyone can be connected or meshed, or a mesh system where everyone can be connected through someone to someone else. Our colleagues defined the social networks that were behind movements and grassroots movements as scale-free, which is also very interesting. So they observed that through time, there were networks that recombinated their way to connect each other and didn't have constantly a center, but also were scale-free. So they could scale freely. One node that could be seen as marginal could connect more. We thought at that time that this is the future of politics, non-centralized. And this was our project. This was personally my first project for the European Commission. It was 2012. It was piloted by our principal investigator, Francesca Bria, whom you know, and it led to her nomination as alderman of Barcelona. So you can see the project on the website and all the publications, of course, available. Later on, we went, well, this was one of the conclusions of the project. We have our final event. As guest, we had Julian Assange, Pablo de Soto, you see on the right. We had the Alcaldesa of Madrid, Manuela Carmena, and this was quite a memorable event that many people still remember today in Brussels. This is a story of marginality, I must also say, to great pleasure to the Deleuzians in this group, but somehow deluding us in how the European Commission would really take up and understand our research. Our research was not understood at all. It was marginalized, and so we moved on to other researchers. I say this because I believe that today we have the proof that a certain adversaries to Europe, direct adversaries to Europe, have absolutely understood the value of decentralization and have used it against us, while Europe arguably is moving towards a centralization agenda as a centralization project. So let it be a constructive critique. We moved to Decode project. Decode project stands for decentralized citizen-owned data ecosystem. It moved from the economical research part in Decent because we thought that by decentralizing access to citizen data in dense settlements as cities, the The pilots were Barcelona and Amsterdam. By decentralizing access to data, we will opening up the silos on which the Google, Amazon, Uber, Tinder, you name it, were building an empire of relational data connectivity, so short-circuiting desires and demand and offer. So we understood that data was, as some put it, the new oil, and we tried to build a legal framework which was seminal to the GDPR, and we try to build also an economic framework and a technical framework to allow data of people to be shared openly without hindering on their privacy. This project was also a success in a way, if you name it so, but a success for someone else. 4 of our colleagues were acqui-hired by Facebook after 2 years of the project. We developed groundbreaking algorithms for zero-knowledge proof that were used in Libra, that are today used in NIM, that are powering several cryptocurrencies, including the one used by meme coins, by the idiot on the other side of the pond. So, not to say that we developed this technology for that. We developed it because it is interesting to be used to decentralize access to information and to build a zero-knowledge proof network where there is less liability for everyone. Imagine you are a school and you have the names of students and you want to collaborate with a third party providing you credential systems or access systems. You can grant this third party certain pointers to unicity to the person holding the credentials without giving up the names of your students. I hope I make an example that is close to you. This lowers the liability both of you and of the third party. So we developed these sort of systems and we developed them usable at large scale. This is again a story of failure and ignorance from those who commissioned it, because today the European Digital Identity Framework is built without zero-knowledge proof technologies. So it's being built the very standard that is behind the ADAS 2 and the European Digital Identity Framework is not incorporating, at least yet, zero-knowledge proof algorithms. This has been voiced by various cryptographers better than me in the field as a big error. So we're going forward without learning from our own research. So we moved on. We moved on to a different field. As you know, we have been active in circular economy. And this is, I think, the most tangible and successful project that we have done with the Helmut Schmidt University, which is namely the German Military Academy, together with the Fab City Hamburg, the Fab City network worldwide. And I'm happy to say that our collaboration with the Helmut Schmidt is continuing. So we're just starting a continuation of this project, funded in the framework of a regional research and development project. Our colleagues Setto and Adam are fully in touch also with all these developments. We are looking forward to how to build a decentralized network that details how hardware, open source hardware is made, open source it, facilitates the circulation of manuals, and also allows more people to use it, also private entities. So the dream behind this, you see, still the driving is decentralization, but in this case is readapted to a notion of distribution, because production, especially material production, has necessarily built nodes of production that are central to that sort of logistical production, and therefore we talk about distribution here. Let's say some German company, I won't name it now, bigger enough to produce material goods and ship them all over the nation, gets interested in our database of 3D designs. So they will become central to that distribution. And this is distributed then by those nodes. I argue that this is not a betrayal of decentralization, rather a necessary declination of the material production into a decentralized field. And what we try to do here is to build a distributed design wealth network that redistribute the wealth to all people that contribute to a design. Imagine Git for programmers, for developers. By now, many of you know it. Well, imagine Git for designers. If you fork and contribute to a project, if that project with your contribution will ever get printed, then you get a share of the value that was produced by printing and redistributing it. This is very simple now explained. Of course, we go through a lot of technicalities, and we also built a network of crypto based remuneration and wallet end-to-end encryption holding to facilitate the circulation of value that can be then redeemed in fab cities. Now I go to what I think is one of our possible, simple, tangible, and in reach challenges, and is the same word that I produced when I was invited the last time to talk. It was in the first event in Trondheim. Repair. Why I say this is because, as I said, then we have a law that backs the right to repair for consumers. And because calling back to the licensing model of the free and open source software, I believe that repair is a very simple concept, but it does emanate a number of situations in which people can reappropriate and redistribute. They can freely study and distribute modifications of objects. This is an economical notion, I believe, first and foremost. And the example is once again the one of shops that can be born without any franchising, any authorization to repair objects that are most in use in our society, no matter how complex. It is also built on the assumption that recalls projects by Florian, 30 years old now, that everyone is an expert. I mean, if you really want it. We built an economic system around what I named before the distributed design, which you can find in the chapter that is freely available from Springer Nature. It is a open publication, as we do only this sort of publications. And here we describe a very simple and obvious way to organize your local fab city and fab lab around the notion of openness to new projects and redistribution of value. It's a simple dual point system that we built there. Once you see it, you will see that it's rather simplistic, but behind it is the idea that to really build a new way to circulate ideas, materials, designs, we need to open up also our hierarchies. And here I call back to the first, fake diagram copy-pasted from Wikipedia. Decentralization is not hierarchy, and sometimes people call decentralization a system of hierarchies. Just delegating someone else to certain specific tasks is not enough to open up the space. Imagine a person stepping into one of our real-world labs and talking to one person and then to the other person, which is subordinate to that person. It's just a matter of hierarchy. It's not horizontal, because we know the power structures that are in place between the people that are being communicated with. So when we when we have rules that are equal for everyone and allow new people, completely new people with brilliant ideas to step into a place and pitch their ideas to everyone, then we have a real decentralized system. Otherwise, we are just running another lab, which has another boss and has other sub-bosses and other sub-bosses. And we have seen this situation many times, not only in PaceSetter, walking into real-world labs. So here is my challenge. And here is the last thing that I propose you is a broader vision. Now I'm going back to theory. And the broader vision, which perhaps is the one to be debated from a theoretical perspective, is how to organize our way to create and circulate objects, ideas, notions, even political ideas, but also like objects. This is very abstract. I use the Grema semiotic square here to propose 4 different moments of free circulation of ideas, both in real world labs and in our organizations. There are 4 moments: creation, sharing, appropriation, and distribution. And Grema invented this narratological device to schematize, to build schemas around situations. And here I use it to describe the industrial approach to this sort of context. So the typical modern industry implementation of ideas, of things, is to create them. God knows where the idea comes from. So there is this notion of the genius inventor that creates something and patents it. Then appropriate it, indeed, patents it. So translates this idea to your own language, inscribe it into the books of your own society that says that you have invented it. Which is an extremely narcissistic and egotistic moment, which we can recognize in the leaders of the world right now. Distribution is powered by large resources around distributing it at industrial scale, so becoming a central place of distribution. And when people get in touch with these creations, then they share it among themselves. This is natural. We have a natural propension to share. Imagine videos, books, music. We just want to share them, which is part of the thing. But when sharing becomes creation naturally, so when people recreate from the sharing, that is denied. And that is the place where most legislations and also law enforcement is acting today. We cannot reshare things. You can just think of the context where to apply it. So I argue that this circle should be inverted. From a counter-clockwise movement, we should see it as a clockwise movement, and we should not see a place where it starts from. So economically speaking, this is a virtuous circle in which we do not waste our time in understanding where something comes from, but we understand that if someone has the will and energy, someone or a society or an entire community has the will to appropriate something and create something from it, translate it to your own language, contextualize it, apply it, then share it and redistribute it, still money can be made from this circle, can be made in many ways, and free and open source software has demonstrated it with landmark acquisitions of large operations, mostly understood in the US, still not understood in Europe. And we can actually build a new notion of decentralization around an economic notion of sharing, creation, appropriation, and distribution. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaromil. Super, super good introduction, and thanks for also giving us an overview of the different notions of decentralization, distribution, and how it can be, how we can think through it for PACESETTERS as well. It's super, super helpful and very inspiring also. I think it's I mean, at least I get a lot of ideas about like what would it mean in terms of could it be translated like your ideas of the the sharing of design and reversing the value flow. To me, that seems like that's also easy to do with artists and artworks and artisans. I would guess. But yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts also. If there are like, how do you have some ideas also for pacesetters in the real world labs, and maybe the differences between the real world labs? And also, if there anyone else who have any questions, this would be a good time to ask any questions.
Well, about the real-world labs, our colleague Zoe here has worked the most in touch with them, and we are fully aligned. She is also more experienced than me on the field of Fab Cities, so I'd rather listen to her account on those, because at this point my ideas will be too abstract.
If I may enter the discussion,
Please.
I think I really like the presentation, and I think, yes, it was a bit abstract in the sense of then you need to connect with what is on the territory. And actually, one of the things that I would like maybe to ask you, because somehow when you study and understand how also coding community work, is not just there is a lot of openness in the stepping in, but there is kind of filtering in the step up. So it's not a matter of just everyone can participate, everyone can contribute, but then there is a lot of connection and a kind of a protocol in how people take responsibility within an horizontal community. So, because it's not immediately, because the equilibrium and the relationship within a community can easily be disrupted if there is not consistency with the way you work within a community, in the way you contribute. So I would like to, if you can give some hints around this stepping up process, in which way people are like taught how to contribute and how to behave within a community, because it's not something taken for granted. Because what we see in my experience, there is a lot of people that don't know how to contribute in this community. So this has to be somehow filtered, and not in keeping people out, but having a process into the stepping up in the community. Can you, if you have any like experience around this?
Well, in my experience, skill has always been a big filter, if we put it that way. So if someone is skilled about something, everything else gets out of the way in considering this person contribution. But skill, I believe, is also subjective somehow. There's people that look at certain skills as more important than others. And in a way, in my most recent experience in larger scale groups, the fact that rules are in place, not as rules, but really as a code for the community, and a topic is in place and is respected, that is very important. Because many times people step into it and maybe they don't know how to contribute, maybe they are disorienting the whole situation, but they put focus on things that don't matter for the project. So the focus of the project should be kept, and the rules should not change. And about the stepping up, what I see, sadly, is that most often people stepping up to guide on the basis of their bigger contribution to a community become the worst enemies of themselves and the community, because they will constantly consider their ideas as guiding and fresh and important, but there will be many people at the door trying to propose their own ideas, and a channel for proposition and for a free flow of new people into it really gaining power not just serving the structure of power, should be in place. And this is difficult within institutions because of many reasons. So that is a big challenge, and of course it's not as simple as replacing a leader. Yeah.
Thank you. I think Florian first, and then Joe.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Zoe, and also now Jaromil with your reply, because I think this is indeed quite a tremendous challenge for the real world laboratories, not only for open source developer communities, but I think there's a great deal to learn from it. We are at the moment developing, and I think this would be very interesting to map this against the last slides that Jaromil just presented, not the diagrams with the industrial mode and the decentralized mode. We are currently developing for the real-world laboratories an approach that puts in the center and at the first place, the top urgency on strengthening creative confidence. Making clear that everybody has something to contribute, and not because we are so generous and we feel this moral superiority because we have these good intentions and we are fighting for the greater good and so on and so forth. But based on a very material and very concrete experience that the climate crisis is a collective threat that cannot be responded to on an individual or personalized level. This requires a completely new understanding of creativity, or what it means to create something new. And this requires a creative confidence, or gives us the chance. And I think we see already the seeds of this in many different fields. But we have to figure out how can we create in the real world laboratories, in these real world scenarios, not only on a theoretical plane, not only in online or in online communities. How can we, in very concrete person-to-person encounters, how can we strengthen this creative confidence, which means you refer to everyone as an expert. I mean, or we could say everyone is an artist with Joseph Beuys. In that sense, probably it's a tremendous misunderstanding of Beuys, but I think it's a productive misunderstanding. Everybody is creative. Everybody can contribute something in this context, but all this is meaningless and leads to terrible mess, if we do not at the same time, in a second step, open up spaces and capacities for reflexivity and reflecting on what is going on. I think this is absolutely crucial. It's not only about implementing rules and laws, and this has to happen in order to prevent some other thing from happening. It's really about, and this is something where we can really learn a lot from feminism, queer theory, and a lot of both theoretical and practical developments over the last decades. If we don't open up a space where we can reflect, a safe space in which we can reflect about our own role in the process of collective creativity or collective agency, we will not be able to handle the challenges that result from mass creativity or this mobilization, massive mobilization of creativity on a local level. Because together, the creative confidence and the space, the safe space for reflection, then allows to claim collective ownership. I think these are the two conditions for this, and I think it would be very interesting to map this against your creation, sharing, distribution, and appropriation diagram, no? Because I think it resonates and it could be very, very helpful for the real world laboratories to use this as a blueprint in a certain way, no? It will in every case, no? I mean, in Galway, in Chenalgasil, in Nova Huta, reflecting about our own role in the processes of creation will look very differently. It will have very different implications, but it's exactly this diversity and these different perspectives that then produce value. Yeah, I would leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Florian. Joe?
Firstly, thank you very much to Florian, Mari, Jaromil, Zoe. I mean, I was going to pick up really on the notions of power and hierarchies, and also the references to particularly the queer movements, which help understand actually how I think different forms of leadership. So I spent a lot of my time trying to understand ways of organizing and other ways of organizing that move beyond traditional hierarchical structures, centralized structures, which we all enact in and of ourselves because we've been kind of hard-coded to behave that way. So I think as well in the real world labs, I think the confidence and the reflection are really fundamental in terms of the fact that we are situated within the research ourselves. So therefore we must recognize our own bias and how it can affect others. Because most people still seem to think that, you know, I'm a genius because I had an idea. You didn't, you just had a thought. And it doesn't mean it has any intrinsic value in and of itself. So I think there are huge questions to be asked in the real world laboratories is how we move from notions of inclusion, which are entirely paternalistic, to actually understanding dissonance. So we've talked about this a lot actually in various other conversations. It's not about inclusion or consensus. It's actually about understanding dissonance. Because if you don't have that, you don't have the ability for people to be distributed or forms of leadership, because there's nothing wrong in essence with the concept of leadership. It's a problem if it's top down and hierarchical and not something that's shared and exchanged and transfers from one person to another, and other things are allowed to emerge. So I think there's a lot of questions to be asked in terms of how we act with each other. And how we're able to reflect with each other, and obviously as well, I mean, the real world laboratories are pre-accelerator models, asking questions of fundamental economic systems, which are entirely based on the protocols of hierarchy. So being able to move away from that model, in some sense, we ourselves have to be able to see it, that we're in it and see it, how it functions, and then be able to deconstruct it.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yeah, and
as much a stream of consciousness as usual.
no, thanks. It's also very interesting in the sense that thinking of yeah, like stepping up, or like you mentioned, Zoe, that each lab also is so embedded in a certain sense of community. So it has this kind of very strong existing community, social fabric, hierarchies, and kind of leadership models already. So the real world labs are kind of, they're not built from scratch and from nothing. They come into a very established, perhaps very strong and perhaps also traditional. So that's also a challenge, like what can be done there, and
It's no, it is very tricky. I mean, just to give an example of Spain, we have more protocols than you know what to do with.
yes. Yes. Yeah. No, it's but it's good to have these conversations, reflections, understandings, and sharing of strategies. I think is super helpful. Learning also from your work at Dyne, Jaromil, and Zoe, and super interesting for us to learn from what you have experienced there.
I had one more comment, because I also agree that I really like your diagram, Jaromil, and I don't think it's abstract. I think actually it's really, it could be like really practical to help people understand how actually things flow.
Yeah.
I think it really help I think it could help people who want to escape a certain model but don't quite know how to get out. Like understand how you could find an exit.
Yeah. So
Yeah, if I may add, just to give a practical example, when you go on practical production of objects, of course, you are in a moment in which you have 8 hours a day, you have a machine, and there is a limitation on how many things you can produce in one day. And if you have 100 creative ideas of something you want to produce with the knitting machine, which one should we produce? Because we need to choose, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, I don't know. So who chooses which creative idea to produce? So that's where you go in the like the devil in the details in this type of things. So who chooses which is the creative idea to be produced, to be put in the museum, to be sold? And so the idea, I mean, I did a research in the past around how, for example, in Chatuchak market in Bangkok, the creatives were working. So they were not doing a big production. They were proposing every week, like 3, 5 prototypes, and then in 5, 10 copies. And then who was selling more was produced more. So you can create some kind of saying, what is the objective? The objective is creating object that people appreciate. And so, of course, the aesthetic quality of this, who has to decide it? The only way is to go really practical. And so giving a fast round of proposal in order to then decide what to keep producing. So at the end of the month, when you proposed like 10 creative designs, you have 3 that were appreciated, 4 that didn't sell anything. So it depends what is the final objective. You can also propose the on-demand production in which you can have many prototypes and then people ask for it, and then it's produced only when it's asked for it. So, I mean, what I'm saying is that you can have different protocols to decide what the time of production should be invested on. So it's just a way to go more practical in the issues that are usually happening when you have to deal with creative production.
It resonates, Zoe, with my experience in the art world, and I like to give this account because many of us work in that field. I stopped working in art work, but it was 2012. Back then, I was directing the research and development department of the Netherlands Institute of Media Art. And at our department of video art, Gabi Weyers, who still leads the Lima in Amsterdam, preserving all the huge, it's a catalog of video artists that passed through Amsterdam. Back then, we were looking at the statistics of artists. And so we had the top 4 that covered for more than 90% of the demand of distribution of the whole art catalog. We had Marina Abramovic, of course. We had Erwin Olaf. We had Peter Bogers, Julika Rudelius, and a few others. And they were covering for really like the large amount of demand of media art, video art, especially video art installations, multi-channel. It's what we did around in public spaces in the Netherlands. I'm sure that it's very similar also in your context. And yeah, it resonates what you just said, and it makes a difference to be more inclined to or manage to actually convince the society that is asking for it that the topics are more important than the names, because at a certain point you have an attitude of waiting that the the very important and most known artists that have, that are entrenched into a system that doesn't move much are talking about the important topic. So we are waiting still that, Marina Abramovic says something about environmental crisis, but that is not their job, and it doesn't resonate really much in their aesthetics. So, it's now I'm cracking jokes on this, but this is about hierarchy. And last thing, I like to comment on what was said so far is I have some pessimism. I doubt even that someone at the Commission will look at this forum, but if they ever do, I have some pessimism about the fact that these policy advices that we are piloting, elaborating, and we know very well, and we can prove through facts, they will ever be listened to. I think that is a dramatic situation for Europe that is closing up into more centralizing strategies to face the challenges ahead, which are very serious, rather than embracing a certain resilience into the approach, both from an economical perspective, cultural perspective, but also like a power perspective.
Thanks, Jaromil. Yeah, that's the sad perspectives on this, but let's pretend as if they do listen. Okay, so we are running.
I like that Florian is saying no. I really wanted to have good news from him.
I really sorry, Adam, but you have to allow me to jump in here. I totally contradict. I think what you're just describing, these are good news. So rather than waiting that somebody on the top, policymakers, EU Commission, and so on and so forth, finally gets it and understands how to solve our problems, we have to, we have the chance now, also on this level of confrontation, on this level of absurdity, which we are navigating at the moment. It gives us the chance, to leave this phantasma of liberal, of the illusion as if there is it's just a matter of improving and incrementally advancing the liberal mindset, so that finally the right directives come from the top down. No, on the contrary, I think we have a unique opportunity to discuss in a micro setting, like a small town in the south of Spain, a medium-sized town in the west of Ireland, and a really large-scale peri-urban settlement. We have the possibility to declinate and to discuss the same challenges that we identify, in terms of collective agency, collective ownership, decentralized architecture, and to discuss this with different consequences. Just one example, because I think it's absolutely crucial, and you touched it in the beginning of your presentation. In order to make sure that these kind of decentralized collective agencies don't flip into a massive scheme of surveillance and control, or totally new regime of control, encryption is key. So this has different consequences, and it's very interesting to analyze this. What does it mean to create privacy in a village where anyway everybody knows everybody, and is gossiping about everybody and so on and so forth, So you have a completely different challenge here than in a huge in a huge urban context, where the opposite might be the first or primary challenge, to make people get to know each other, to overcome anonymity, and so on and so forth, So I think to have here an approach that is conceptually safe and clear, that is technologically feasible, or technically feasible, and at the same time has the potential to empower people, to start processes that are bottom up. Because capital and governments only respond. They are not creative. They will only act if there is pressure. or an urgency or a need to change policy. They will not change policy because they read they read a lot of research and interesting policy recommendations. So I think it's good. It's good that we can.
Thanks. I was calling for this injection of optimism. It's I needed it this morning, so thanks.
Thanks. Adam, sorry, just before we move on to you, I see now that Chinedam, you joined us. Thanks for joining us as well. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. We are running a little bit late, but then I see you also came a little bit late, so I think we are kind of in sync, which is great. We had originally planned now for a break for 15 minutes. I would suggest, if everyone agrees, that we kind of make a break of 5 minutes and then we meet again. I would just hand the word to Adam for a last comment. We meet in 5 minutes, and then maybe you and I, Chinedam, can just quickly coordinate the following, the second part of the session, if that's okay. So if everyone agrees, I would then hand the word to Adam for a last comment. Sorry, Joe, we will save you for the next session. Yes.
It's in the chat. I was just agreeing. Where's the time to create alternatives? Now you have to go for it.
Okay, perfect. Our break will be a little bit shorter, but then yeah, Adam, please.
Yeah, no, just super brief. I wanted to first of all thank Jaromil and everyone who's made comments, but specifically I wanted to thank Zoe, because I think Zoe mentioned the rationale and the need for production, both on the side of the producer and the perception of the desires of people and the want, the need, which, you know, we have a great opportunity to start to look at collective needs of local people and to start to really redefine and look at ways that these collective needs can scale in alternate methods. And I just think that that's, you know, as Florian mentioned, each of the real world labs are at a huge scale. So to study the needs and the desires of these local real world labs in that sense, to me, sense to provide opportunities to replace or complement the current capitalistic definitions of needs and desires and production. Anyway, that was all food for thought.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zoe.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Zoe. Thanks, Jaromil, Florian, Joe, and everyone for the first part of our session.
Cheers.